As Tamara said, I'm Nick Nauslar. I work with Tamara and Tim Brown with the CFA program here at DRI. And during the summer, kind of like I'm doing now, a lot of this work, the hard work, was done by the Predictive Services program through the land agencies across the United States. And during the summer, I actually fill in for them as a fire meteorologist. So once again, I'm filling in for them today. So quick outline, we're just going to examine some current drought conditions. I know Kelly went over this extensively this morning. Look at some current fire indices and fire conditions. Look at the seasonal forecast for temperature and precipitation, kind of a drought outlook or forecast kind of throughout the summer, and then finally look at some fire season outlooks. And feel free, if you have a question, to raise your hand. So current drought conditions, I'll just briefly touch on this. You see most of the Great Basin and the Sierra are in at least abnormally dry, if not drought stricken. And this will play a major impact in the fires that we're having. As you guys saw this morning, we had some smoke from that Northern California fire over, and if you saw the news, there's a couple fires in Southern California, one burning just kind of between Oxnard and Malibu, and it's almost made it to the ocean, and if not, it'll probably make it by the end of the burning period today. So it looks like it could be a fairly active, once again, a fairly active fire year for the western United States. So I always like people, always going, is this going to be an abnormal fire season? Is this going to be earlier than normal? Is this a late year? What's going to happen? I always think it's a nice idea to show kind of the natural fire progression throughout the United States during the summer, and usually we'll focus on the western United States. And you can see in May, California and the Southwest start to get into fire season, and we started to see some fires already cropping up in California. And then kind of May, the last few Mays have been pretty busy in the Southwest. They've had, I think Arizona had their third largest fire a couple years ago, and then New Mexico's had two of their top 5 largest fires in the last 2 years. And they're looking to be busy once again, although they haven't really started up quite yet. There's just one smaller fire down there right now. But as you can see, the fire progression kind of moves out of California, and then the pre-monsoon, kind of in the Southwest Four Corners area. And we'll start moving into Utah, Colorado, and start moving further north in the Pacific Northwest into June, and then July. Pretty much all of western United States is in fire season at this point. And then August, same thing as well, moving further north and inland into the continental areas, and once the snowpack starts melting further north in the United States. So this is a normal fire progression. Fires are normal throughout the western United States during the year. The key is it going to be a below normal year, or below average year, or above average year? So taking a look at some fire indices, I'm going to look at the energy release component. If some of you aren't familiar with it, it's kind of a fire index that measures the amount of heat release per unit area. So it's a good measure of where the fuels are right now. So it's a mixture of measures both live and dead fuels, fuel moistures, and from this, they can infer and calculate the fire potential, so to speak, of a certain area and certain fuels. So looking at the northwest corner of Nevada, the blue line is where we are in 2013. The dates are along the bottom line, so this is from the beginning of the year and kind of projected through right about, I think it was last week when they ran these numbers, or earlier this week. And you can see the red line was 2012. And then the average is there in the gray line. And you can see we're well above average for this time of year. We're actually about the similar pace as we were for last year in northwestern Nevada. Northwestern Nevada had some large fires, especially up on the Oregon and Idaho borders. So looking at this, it's like, well, we could have a fairly busy fire year in northwest Nevada, but one thing you have to keep an eye on is that you may be dry now, but the one thing that really fuels fires, especially in the Great Basin where there's more finer fuels, grasses and shrubs, is you need fine fuel buildup. And to get that, you need some good winter and spring precipitation, which, if you guys have been around here, we pretty much were dry since the first week of January. So one thing that's kind of mitigating, even though we're very dry, some of the large fire potential is the buildup of fine fuels. And so he said we're really dry right now, but as we go further on out into the year, especially into June and July when we really hit our fire season, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a fair amount of fires, but the acreage could be a little bit about normal and maybe even slightly above normal, according to what a lot of predictive services people have been looking at. The Sierra front, the Sierra is very dry. Snowpack most of it is below 75%, and the majority of it's below half, especially in the central and southern Sierra. And you see the Sierra front is about the same thing as last year, which was very dry, well above normal, and also above the 95th percentile. And both the predictive services in the Western Great Basin, Southern California and Northern California are worried about the foothills around the Sierra and also the higher timber fields within the Sierra as well too, due to the drought and snowpack. And we say this with the caveat, you also have the fine fuels buildup, which does help start the surface fire and preheat the larger fuels, and then you see the larger, more severe fires later in the season. Another thing to note is the monsoon. Are we going to have a strong monsoon? Is it going to push up this way? Are we going to have Pacific landfalling systems? And that all will impact the timing of the fire season and how severe it will be in June, July, and through August. Go through a few more of these. So this is just kind of on the edge of the Great Basin. I wanted to point this out. Most of Utah is not scheduled to have above average fire season, or southern Idaho for that matter. Although if some things fall, if you're a firefighter, correctly, so you get some overtime, or incorrectly, if you're a land manager or public, you could see some strong fires or large fires if the monsoons hold off and you continue to have hot and dry weather throughout the next couple of months. And so that shows that they're well above normal up in the kind of central Idaho mountains. Northern Sierra, once again, is above normal, and the current fire that gave us the smoke this morning is actually, I believe, it's either in this predictive service area that I pulled the graph from, or right on the edge with the one next to it. And both of them were well above normal. And you can see early burning time, although May's not that unusual for just starting to see fires in the lower elevations of the foothills of the Sierra. But still, it's kind of a sign that we'll see that it will be a pretty active fire year throughout the Sierra. Central Sierra, similar story. Right now we're above average and approaching the 97th percentile and above the 95th percentile. And I'll go through the next ones a little bit quicker. Southern Sierra, same thing. The maximum, we're setting new records in some of these figures. The red line is the maximum. And so, the snowpack, John Abbott-Glue and Crystal Colden did a study, and some other people have provided that snowpack isn't always the best predictor of fire potential during the summer. Spring and summer conditions also have a major impact on that. But one thing in the Sierra, if you do have a below average snowpack, it does set you up for a big fire year. So temperature and precipitation forecast, this is from the Climate Prediction Center. Although they didn't do a great job with some of the forecasts for the spring, they usually do a good job. And you can see for May, above average across the western United States and below average precipitation or near normal. And then looking out into the summer, May, June, and July, near normal temperatures to well above normal temperatures are expected for the western United States, and mostly below average precipitation. So they're not too bullish on the monsoon reaching up further than the very southern part of the southwestern United States as of right now. Like I said, this is still 3 months ahead of time, 2 to 3 months ahead of time, so a lot of things can change. But right now, the indices are looking that the monsoon will be average at best. The one thing to keep an eye on is the Madden-Julian oscillation, which kind of has a 30 to sometimes 90-day return. And if that starts getting active, that will help the monsoon push further up into the Four Corners area and into the Great Basin. And the Northern California and Southern California predictive services offices have also said that a similar pattern to this is set off, where we kind of have a cutoff low set up off the California coast, which we're going to see actually starting this weekend, and that usually brings thunderstorm chances to California. And depending on the moisture that it brings with it, it can bring some relief, or it can just bring a lot of lightning, which then means a lot of fires for the Sierra and across California. So that's another thing that they're keeping an eye on. Drought outlook from those forecasts, as you can say, pretty much if you're west of the Rocky Mountains, you're a good chance you're going to be in drought or developing into drought. The Northern Rockies and Central and Northern Cascades are still had a pretty good year for snow. And it'll take a while for them to dry out, so they're still doing well in terms of drought. So finally, the fire outlooks for May. South Central Oregon and kind of the foothills around the Central Valley are looking to be above average, and then into Southern California, the mountains and foothills down there, which these guys are looking kind of pretty good right now with all the fires being in the red. And then you can see the text with this is increasing to above normal down in the southwest. They're anticipating drier conditions, and their major fire season is between May and June before the monsoon hits, and so they're expecting fire activity to pick up in the next month. June, as you can see, the Sierra is pretty much all in red. Part of the Western Great Basin, reason why they haven't gone to red in the Sierra front, you kind of see a sharp cutoff, is talking with Gina and reading her discussion, is the fine fuel buildup, which really drives fires in the foothills and the lower elevations across the Great Basin. Isn't great right now, but there is some leftover crops in southern Nevada, and you can start seeing the Arizona Strip into southern Nevada and the southern part of the Great Basin could increase depending on whether that will happen in May and June. Finally, July and August start creeping above average into Oregon and throughout all of the Sierra, and even into parts of Nevada as well too, along the edges of western and northern Nevada. They're expecting drier conditions to persist, and then with lightning chances coming about, a lot more natural ignitions into July and August. But as Gina said, it's not like we're not going to have fire activity. This is just saying, is it going to be normal or above normal or below normal? And right now, Western Great Basin and Eastern Great Basin are looking to be about normal, with elevated fire risk into the Sierra. So in summary, precipitation early in the water year and cold temperatures mitigated some of the drought, like Kelly talked about, but we did have a very dry late winter and spring. So elevated fire indices are showing, are reflective of this. And then above average fire season for the Sierra, far western and northwestern Great Basin is predicted. Some areas could become above average depending on the weather patterns and how they shake out, and the timing of the monsoon is always a yearly concern. The monsoonal moisture and stream frequency are key this summer because, especially if that low sets off the California coast, you'll have an increase of ignition chances across California and into the Sierra. And so you may see a lot of smaller fires, especially if there's precipitation with it. And if there's not a lot of precipitation with it, if it's drier, then you could see some larger fires, which will verify that above average risk. And I just want some references. The predictive services people, I pulled a lot of material from their reports and talked with them, so they get a lot of the credit. I'm just kind of the messenger for them right now. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them right now. No? Perfect.